Imagine this scenario. You're sitting at home and minding your own business when suddenly a bunch of guys in suits bust into your house and kidnap you. They drag you to their office and sit you down in front of the CEO of the company that makes your favorite game series, who tells you, "We are making a new game in your favorite franchise and we're making it catered specifically to you. No limitations, no obstacles. What would you want in your hypothetical perfect video game?" This is a little thought exercise I've discussed with my friends in the past, and I think it's really interesting to talk about, especially since everyone has different priorities and reasons why they like certain games, and opinions can be really varied even within the same franchise. And today, I want to get into that subject and talk about one of my favorite franchises, Pokemon. I haven't talked about it too much on this channel, but I really enjoy these little critters, even if I haven't been super into the last few games. But I've recently been really itching to do some Pokemon fan art, and my friends at Ohuhu just sent me some new markers to play with, so why not hit two birds with one stone by drawing some of my favorite Pokemon and talking about the series. I'll be going through my thoughts on the markers at the end of the video, but for now, let's talk and draw. Also, I want to preface this with a big ol' disclaimer. You do not have to agree with my points here. This isn't me saying what I think would be best for the series as a whole, this is just what I would want in Star's hypothetical perfect Pokemon game. I am not a game designer, I'm just here to have fun and talk, and I'm not expecting any of these to actually get implemented into the series, but, you know, some of them might be nice. Generation 10's gonna come out at some point. Hey, Game Freak, I've got some proposals! Also, if you have ideas for what you'd want in your hypothetical perfect Pokemon game, feel free to drop them in the comments. Let's talk about it, I'm curious. That being said, let's get into it. First, I want to go into a bit of my personal experience with the series. Pokemon Gold was the very first video game I ever owned, and Gen 2 has a soft spot in my heart as a result. I actually didn't play the Gen 1 games until way later in life, though I was familiar with them from watching the anime and reading the little Pokemon handbooks. I swear I had these things memorized as a kid. I read them over and over and tried to replicate the art in my little baby sketchbooks. I played a ton of Pokemon all through childhood, but the most hardcore I ever got into the series was during Gen 5. The games came out when I was in college and I was an active member of our school's Pokemon League. I was even a gym leader for a few years. Gen 5 I think is my favorite generation, partially for that, but also just because I adore so many designs from that era. A lot of my favorite Pokemon made their debut in black and white, specifically my all-time favorite, Emolga. I love this little guy so much, look at him, oh. But after the Gen 5 games, I started falling off the series. Part of it was just me getting older, I think, but part of it was also not being as into some of the new stuff they implemented. I didn't like the designs of new Pokemon as much, and I think of the entire Scarlet and Violet Pokedex, I only liked 2 or 3 Pokemon. Ceruledge is awesome, and I suppose Grasscat is cute, but like, that's kind of it. Oh, and I like the hot dog, actually. Doxbun? Doxbun's very cute. And the Snow Leopard Legendary is cool looking, but I never actually caught it in game. You could hold a gun to my head and I would not be able to tell you what this thing's name is. Between not liking a lot of new Pokemon designs and the formula of the mainline game staying pretty much the same gen after gen, it just kind of felt like things were getting stale. Not to say there weren't things I enjoyed in the later games. I adore the character customization that came with later gens, and there's actually a lot of story and characters I like in some of the new games. I really liked Sword and Shield, for example. And I think it's cool how spin-off games like Legend Arceus mixed with the formula a bit, but I do definitely have some gripes, so let's get into it. We'll go ahead and start with the elephant in the room. I really didn't like Scarlet and Violet, like, at all. I enjoyed the character dynamics with the little friend group you had by the end of the game, but the story I thought was kinda weird at best and boring at worst. And while I think the option to do the gyms and story in any order was interesting, I don't think it was executed very well. And here comes maybe the hottest take in the video. I don't think every video game needs to be open world, and I think Pokemon being open world sucks the life out of the games. There, I said it! Open world games can be fun, sure, but there's a clear difference between a game that lets you go anywhere and is actually interesting to explore, and tons of open empty space that's boring to walk across and doesn't have much to offer. And I fear Pokemon attempts at open world games have largely been the latter. Legend Arceus was a little better in this regard, but the wild area in Sword and Shield was just kinda there, and Scarlet and Violet, like, performance issues notwithstanding, I just really didn't enjoy the spaces between the various towns and cities. It just felt so empty. I was never really motivated to explore because after a while the game taught me not to expect to find anything. Like, sure, you'd run into Pokemon and maybe find an item occasionally, but for the most part it just felt like a big empty expanse I just had to get through to get to the next town. And it was almost like the game developers knew how boring traveling through it was because they gave you a Pokemon to ride on immediately so you could travel through it faster. Like, talk about the game telling on itself. So my proposal would be a compromise between the old game's environments and the new. A series of smaller, open segments that are designed like the individual routes from older games, but a little bigger and more open. Give the player room to explore and give them interesting things to find when they do. Really design the areas, give them each an interesting aesthetic based on different biomes or environments without all of them needing to be interlinked as part of a massive open world. Instead of focusing on the sheer size and scope, make the areas smaller and more concentrated with interesting things to find. This might be a weird comparison, but a game I actually played that's along the lines of what I'm thinking is Bloodborne. The individual areas were open and there were lots of things to explore, and you could go wherever you wanted within those areas, but they were small enough they didn't feel too spread out or boring. They're very different games, I know, but I think this sort of level design could be good for Pokemon. Smaller, more intricate areas that are more interesting and freeform to explore, linking between the various towns and cities. And using that as a jumping off point into my next topic, non-linear storytelling. So like I said, I get what they were trying to do with the gyms in Gen 9. You can fight the gyms in any order you want, just head in a direction and follow your dreams. And while that sounds cool on paper, I really don't think it was executed very well. Sure, you can fight the gyms in any order you want, technically, but since the gym leaders always have the same set teams at the same set level regardless of what order you fight them in, it still feels like you're being forced into a specific order. If making the gym challenge really doable in any order is your main goal, there needs to be some kind of proper difficulty scaling. The fact that this wasn't a thing in Scarlet and Violet feels like a wild oversight to me. Make the gyms harder or easier depending on how many badges the player already has. The easiest way to do this would to just make the Pokemon higher or lower level depending on the order you choose to fight them in, but we can take this a step further. Consider, gym leaders' teams, movesets, and gameplay strategies completely change based on how many badges you have. Think about it. Think about the insane replay value this would bring to the games. Imagine people playing the games over and over to experience the different gym challenges just based on what order they fight them in. Maybe the water gym is pretty easy if you fight them earlier on, but they're super difficult if you save them for last. Imagine the online discussion between people who all had slightly different experiences with the game. Imagine all the schoolyard conversations between kids who were playing it and having slightly different experiences just based on the order they chose to tackle the gyms in. Imagine the challenge run potential. How wild would it be planning optimal routes for, say, a Nuzlocke challenge or a speed run, keeping your team in mind and planning for gym leaders based on the order you approach them in? I feel like there's so much potential there, and why wasn't this a thing in Scarlet and Violet? We could have had it all! Oh, and speaking of gyms, another thing. Up until now, the gyms in the Pokemon League have always been monotype. Every gym has one Pokemon type they focus on, and everything in the gym is that type. But we've been doing this for years now. I think it'd be fun to mix things up. Consider, instead of gyms based on a single Pokemon type, why not gyms based on certain aesthetics? Hear me out for a second. A gym leader who's a farmer, and all their Pokemon are based on farm animals. A gym leader who's a musician, whose Pokemon all have something sound or music related. A gym leader who's a chef, and all their Pokemon are related to food in some way, and all this regardless of typing. I feel like Scarlet and Violet gave us a sample of this, with the gym leaders all having various jobs and such, but I feel like they were held back due to sticking with the monotype teams. Let them get flexible, make it more interesting. Yes, I'm still mad that the artist gym leader didn't have a Smeargle. Like, come on, it was right there, you guys. I just think this would be such an interesting way to make the gym challenges more interesting. No more sweeping through the bug-type gym just because you have a fire or flying type on your team. Mix it up a little, make it crunchy. Also, while I loved how huge and impactful the gym challenges felt in Sword and Shield, the music was hype as hell, and anyone who disagrees is just wrong, honestly, I really miss the gyms having atmosphere. Like, the Sword and Shield gym stadiums were boring as hell. I mean, come on, the only theming they have is the little banners in the background. Scarlet and Violet brought back a bit of the interesting atmosphere, with each arena being slightly themed to match their location in the world, but the Elite Four's stark, boring cubicle of a battle stadium was boring as hell, and I will never forgive them for this. I feel like X and Y were the last time we had really satisfying gym aesthetics. Not only did the gyms have a really interesting atmosphere based on the type of the gym and the gym leaders, oh my god, look at the Elite Four's battle arenas, look at them! The scale, the impact, the pizzazz, impeccable! Take me back to this, I miss it so bad! On a similar subject, I always liked it when the plot of the games gave you a chance to interact with the gym leaders and Elite Four members outside the gym challenges. Like, their designs and personalities can be so fun, but in some games you basically never see them unless you're actively in battle with them, and that just feels like a bit of a waste. I loved how in games like Black and White or Sword and Shield, you got to see a little more of them and get a better idea of their personalities before and after it was time to square up. Some games, I don't even remember half the gym leaders because you only ever see them in their gym fight, and that's it. Like, come on, game, let me hang out with these guys a bit more, they're cool. Maybe after we beat them, we can just find them milling out in the world and doing stuff. That'd be interesting as heck. Actually, yeah, let's make that a thing. Have important NPCs just hanging out and existing in the world, especially in the post-game. Maybe you can find the bug-type gym leader out in the tall grass looking for Pokemon, and they change where in the world they are based on what day it is. Or you go to the beach and see the water-type gym leader swimming or surfing with their Pokemon, and if you talk to them, you can get a bit of unique dialogue or even re-challenge them. I don't even need these to be full cutscenes, I just think it'd be really interesting to just see them out in the world, being interesting characters that exist outside their plot relevance. I think it'd be a nice way to add some life to the world, you know? Scooting back over into more aesthetic territory, character customization. I love how flexible you could get with your character in a lot of the recent games. I remember playing X and Y and Sword and Shield, and my first stop at any new city would be finding the clothing store and checking out the selection. And the fact that Scarlet and Violet went so in depth with the facial customization, but forced you to be stuck in your stupid school uniform for the entire game was unforgivable. I want to play dress up. I want to make my character cute. I want to have fashion. But also, I want to match my Pokemon. Yeah, that's right. Let me put little outfits on my creatures that actually show up in fights or when they're following me around in the overworld. I feel like now that the games are 3D, this has big potential. Even if it's just like each Pokemon having a head or a neck accessory slot, I want to put outfits on my little guys. I loved getting to do this for your starter in Let's Go, and having the option to do this for every Pokemon would be so freaking cute. And yeah, I know that it's not super feasible to do this for the over 1,000 Pokemon that exist now, but as a reminder, we're talking about hypotheticals here. Like, if the technical and logistical limitations of this weren't an issue, I would go absolutely feral getting my little mons to dress up. I am putting a bow on every legendary Pokemon and nobody is gonna stop me. Also, a little thing, but the ability to switch what type of Pokeball your mons are held in after they're caught would be really nice. I want to match the aesthetic of my Pokeballs to my little critters. And actually, now that I'm thinking about it, bring back the custom Pokeball animations, ball capsules, or whatever they were called in Diamond and Pearl. And while we're at it, let me customize my Pokeballs too. Let me change the colors and add stickers or different textures and paint jobs. I found this post on Reddit that shows what this might hypothetically look like, and now I yearn for the ability to add glitter and rhinestones to my Pokeballs in-game. You know people in universe would actually do that. Let me bedazzle my Pokeballs, come on! Scooting back to some more technical gameplay talk, I do think that the games are really missing out by not having difficulty modes. Like, basically every other game I've played in the last 5 years has difficulty options, why not Pokemon? Like, yeah, I get that it's a game for kids, but that's why you have an easier normal mode. Make that the level of difficulty we've been operating at for years, but add a hard mode on top that has a steeper level curve and more challenging trainer AI. Maybe switch up fights so trainers have actual interesting strategies with their mons. I remember playing Pokemon Coliseum as a kid and having a genuinely hard time because of some of the strategies the bosses in that game used. The one I remember best was a double battle where the boss had his Pokemon alternate between using Protect and Earthquake, so you had to constantly focus your attacks on whichever one wasn't protecting that round, while also trying not to die from getting hit with Earthquake constantly. I remember being stuck on that boss for a while as a kid. Look, I never claim to be good at these games, alright, but having the option for something a little more challenging would be nice. I'm all grown up now. I can play on medium difficulty. But that aside, something I do think would be interesting as well is customizable difficulty settings. Kind of like how Baldur's Gate 3 lets you set your own custom modes by selecting varying levels of difficulty for all aspects of the game, I think this would be really cool for people who wanted to do weird challenge runs. Like setting the wild Pokemon difficulty to crazy high and disabling the ability to flee, turning every wild encounter into something genuinely terrifying. I don't know, I think it could be funny as an optional feature. I may have lost multiple Nuzlocke attempts to wild Pokemon in Sword and Shield just because the wild area is a cruel mistress and my trainer got eaten alive by a wild level 50 Galvantula before I even got to the first gym. Twice in one stream. Imagine if every encounter was like that. I don't know, I think it'd be fun to watch the silly Pokemon YouTuber guys do runs at the game with wackadoodle settings for comedy purposes. I'd watch the hell out of that. Another small thing I don't think they'd implement anytime soon, but that I'd love, being able to ride around on any large Pokemon would be fun as heck. They sorta implemented this in past games. I think this was a feature in Let's Go. I don't remember because I never finished it. But like, I want to do this with any Pokemon that I choose. If my Lapras uses Surf, I want to see my little character actually riding around on a Lapras. My Lapras specifically. Like, if I put a scarf on my Lapras, I want it visible when I ride around on it. There's so many horse-shaped Pokemon now. Let me ride Galarian Rapidash into battle. Let me run around on the back of an Arcanine like I dreamed about when I was a child. I want this so badly. Also, for little Pokemon, being able to let them ride on you or hold them while you ran around would be so cute. Like how Eevee and Pikachu did in Let's Go, but make it any Pokemon. I want a little shoulder Amoga like you wouldn't even believe. I yearn for this. Okay, this next one's really basic, but I'm gonna say it anyway. I want more evolutions. I do, I want more. Jolteon, Umbreon, and Sylveon are up there with my favorite Mons of all time, but heck, I even love Vanilla Eevee, like so much. I read somewhere that the reason they haven't made any more evolutions yet is because there's so many Fakemon evolutions out there that have a hard time making one that's fully original, but like, there's so many Fakemon in general. And they still keep churning out new ones every generation. I want to see a full spread of Eevees. Think of the Gajinka potential. Also, while we're on the topic of stuff that should be obvious but isn't for some reason, they need to redesign some shinies. I feel like if you can't tell at a glance a Pokemon is shiny, it needs a new coat of paint. Garchomp, Glaceon, Gengar, so many Pokemon, you can barely tell when they're shiny. Shiny Pokemon should be special, and they need to be different enough that it's obvious when there's something special about them. I'm a pink shiny Glaceon fan, personally. Another little thing that I didn't think about until a friend brought it up, secret bases. I loved that feature so much. I want a little house in-game that I can design and let my Pokemon hang out in and share online like an Animal Crossing. That'd be so cute. Ooh, actually, let's go further. Have your secret base be like Animal Crossing, where you can design the interior and customize everything from the furniture to the lighting and the vibes. You can have your trainer avatar be visible in the base, and when people visit you, they can challenge your AI trainer with the team composition you set up. You choose the music that plays when people fight you, and if they win, they get your player card as a reward and add it to a challenge album or something. And like in Animal Crossing, you could get a code that people can use to access your secret base, and you can share it online so people can see your base and fight you. This would be so cool! Put it in the game! And my last little thing might piss off some folks who were, like, hardcore into competitive Pokemon, but I gotta speak my truth and your hate comments will fuel my rise through the algorithm. This is actually kind of a thing for any game that has a competitive scene, but I especially feel it with Pokemon since I actually was into competitive Pokemon for a few years there. I don't like the meta. I hate the whole idea that some Pokemon are just, on principle, better than others stats-wise. It feels so weird to me that fully evolved Pokemon wouldn't all have the same number of total stat points. I can understand, like, legendaries and mythicals having higher base stat totals, but I feel like normal, fully evolved Pokemon, if they all have perfect IVs, should have the same stat totals. There's that whole biscuit about the best Pokemon trainer should win with their favorites, but that's a lot harder to justify when some Pokemon are just, going by the numbers, straight up better than others. I feel like the stat discrepancy is really locking down the meta to just Pokemon with big number, and I really think that's a shame. There's so many awesome little critters in these games, and I feel like when I watch game tournaments, I just see the same teams over and over again, with maybe one or two Mon switched out. You'll occasionally get interesting fights, like that one guy a few years ago who swept with a Pachirisu. That was awesome. But these moments tend to be few and far between from what I've seen. I'd love to see some kind of mechanical change that lets more Pokemon be viable for competitive play to open up a wider variety of strategies and matchups. Again, I'm not a game designer, I don't know how this would actually be implemented, but I think it'd make for a more colorful and diverse competitive scene. Plus, if I could actually pull together a team with just my favorites, I'd be way more likely to actually want to get back into doing online fights and stuff. I think that'd be nice. I like Pokemon. Would love to actually enjoy playing it more, you know? But I think that's about all I have for game talk, so let's check out the finished art. Like I said at the beginning, Ohuhu sent me some of their new acrylic marker sets to try out, and after using these for this video, I gotta say I'm a fan. They sent me 2 sets for this review. The first is a set of acrylic brush markers, and if you watched my last video partnership with them, you'd know that I'd been waiting for them to come out with something like this, and the verdict? I like them. I have similar markers from other brands that can be kind of dry and streaky because not enough paint is getting pushed out of the nib, but these have some kind of little mechanism that keeps the brush tips nice and inked, which is really nice. I was actually also sent a set of these back in December as part of a product sampler, so I've been playing with them in my sketchbooks quite a bit. Here's a few other pages where I used them. Gaze upon my OCs. One downside is that the colors on the cap don't match the ink colors very well, but the markers have this little reservoir window where you can see the ink, and this tends to be pretty faithful to how it'll look on paper. And then the second set is interesting. It's actually 2 marker sets in one with the same colors across both sets. The first set is a series of fine point markers, pretty basic, nothing super complicated going on there. But the second set has larger markers and reversible nibs. One side of the nib is a bullet nib, like your standard paint marker, and the other side is a chisel nib, and you can pull the nib out to switch which one you're using. Gonna be honest though, I'm not a huge fan of bullet nibs, so I switched the entire set over to the chisel nib first thing. I like that you can use them to get a good variation of line thicknesses. Across both sets, the ink is super vibrant and opaque. Some of the lighter colors like white and yellow might need 2 coats to be fully opaque, but the rest I only need 1 layer for full coverage, which was really nice. And the ink supposedly works on all surfaces, but I'll be honest, I ever only use these in my sketchbook. I'll probably use them to decorate the cover with them at some point though. Overall, I had a lot of fun using these, and while I'm not the best at drawing critters, I still really enjoyed using these drawings as a way to experiment with a new medium. One thing to note is that these markers do dry a bit slower than other paint markers I've used, especially the dual tip set, which isn't really an inherently good or bad thing, it just kind of depends on your perspective. For example, I don't usually blend much with acrylics, so something that dries a little faster would generally be more convenient, but if you want to do a lot of blending like I did with some of my Pokemon drawings, the slower dry time is actually really helpful. I think my biggest complaint with these right now is that the color selection is kind of on the smaller side. I'd love to see them come out with a larger color range for these, especially the brush tip sets. I'd love to see a 60 or even just a 48 color set. Ohuhu, I know you're watching. More colors, please? Please? But overall, I really liked playing around with these, and I'll have some links down in the description if you'd like to check them out for yourself. And that's gonna be it for this one, but before we go, it's time for Star's Webcomic Corner, the part of the video where I talk about my favorite webcomics, boost my fellow creators, and give you guys something new and fun to read. So, let's get into it. The ocean's full of ghosts, and there's just been a new arrival. When Princess Phaedra and her companions are killed by phantasmal assassins, their souls are sent beneath the waves where the mysterious god of death awaits. He promises them the ability to return to life on one condition: seek out an ancient artifact across the haunted sea. Seeing no other options, the princess agrees, but along the way, her faith in her goddess will be tested, and the dark reality hidden in the depths may just come bubbling to the surface. PHANTOMARINE is a comic I've been following for a while, and it's absolutely fantastic. Each page is a masterclass in color and composition, with careful attention given not just to the characters, but also to every aspect of the environment and the frequent mind-blowing crowd shots. The characters are lovable and intriguing, and the world building is fascinating, with learning more about the world and the different gods being an extremely compelling reason to keep coming back for more. If you love bright colors and a story with a healthy dose of intrigue, this one's gonna get its hooks in you. There's also a plesiosaur. His name is Jeff. Say hi to Jeff, everybody. If you'd like to check out the comic yourself, you can read the entire story for free on the website PHANTOMARINE.com. I'll have links in the description, so go check it out. And that's all for today. I hope you all enjoyed this one. It's a little different than my usual subject matter, but I wanted to experiment a little. I have a few other genres and franchises I'd love to yap about, so let me know in the comments if that's something you'd be interested in. Also, not so fun fact, this was actually my second try making this video because I got about 90% of the way through the edit just in time for my computer to explode before I backed up the files. So I had to make this video twice. That's fun, always fun when that happens. Special thanks as always to my lovely Patreon supporters, and a special thank you to my video shout out tier patrons. Alyssa Herzog, Azure Knight Ruby, Leaf, Mr. Don Matsu, and Holly. Thank you for helping me afford a new UPS and hard drive for my exploded computer. But for now, that's all from me. Fare thee well, friends, and I will see you all next time. Bye!